So to give you a little bio, I lived and raised my family in Manlius, New York, and I was an oncology nurse practitioner for 25 years. And I decided to reach, I picked up traditional quilting with encouragement from friends, took a 6-week class at OCC. I missed 3 of the classes because my kids were small and they got sick, but I got totally hooked. So I started taking classes at some of the local quilt shops and met some wonderful, wonderful friends, and just really fell for fiber and the stitch, which I love. With some encouragement from my family and friends, I bought myself a long arm, and I became a very accomplished long arm quilter. And I started quilting for artists. They would send me their tops, and I would do the quilting for them, and I thought, I want to learn how to do the whole thing. So that's really when I started studying about contemporary abstract work and how to get fiber, how to work with fiber to get it to make a statement. I always love to start with this quilt because it's one of the first, it was when I was making traditional quilts, it's all hand quilted. And it was my first foray into trying to pick colors out, like, you know, when you get a pattern or something, they tell you what colors to put where. But this was like out of my scrap bin, trying to say, what color do I like next to what color? And I think it's just the courthouse step. It's the old traditional courthouse step. And I was very happy. It hangs in my house in my hallway. And it's beautifully, I think it's beautifully, simply hand quilted. And that was before I did long arm work. I also like to start with this piece because there is so much, some of the traditional blocks have very contemporary flair. You know, a square and a square, you know, they have a lot of use in more contemporary works. And that, I think it was one of the places where I really started to say, I migrated from traditional work to more abstract work, and you will see my transition. So I'm going to start with some of the classes I took. This first quilt I'm going to show you is a class I took at QBL, and I don't know if anybody knows what QBL is, but it's Quilting by the Lake, and I took many a summer. I took classes there, met wonderful teachers, and really gained some skills. Unfortunately, it's not a place I study right now, but they do have beautiful artists, and it's really what helped me develop a foundation of my skill set. So this quilt, I took a class with Terry Gerard Diamond, and we had to take a photograph, and we had to figure out how to transfer the image on the photograph into a piece of fiber work. And this is I was lucky to travel with my husband to Paris, and there was a park, and they had all these black and white sculptures, tubular sculptures, and I thought it was beautiful, and I had taken a bunch of pictures, so this is my rendition of the sculpture and the color I picked. This next quilt is just a small sketch I made. It was some fabrics that I had worked on in other classes, and I was trying to learn how to put my own sketch together, you know, working in my studio without the mentorship of a teacher, and I was very pleased with how it came out, the color. And so this is, all of this is commercial fabric, and I think the variation came out very well. And I long armed this. Okay. So this is actually another class I took with Terry Gerard Diamond at QBL. And I have so much fun with this quilt. I learned so much about making this quilt, and it's a very simple. So I made this shape on the wall, this big red shape on the wall. And then in each one of these blocks is the same shape. So here it is in gray and black and whites. This is all commercial fabric. This same shape is the same shape. That's this big red shape. And so I put this shape on my design wall, and I filled in all the places with the fabrics I wanted, and then sewed them all together.
Had a ball.
Yeah. yeah. And it's, to me, it's very fun. And you'll see, as you can see from my quilt downstairs, seeing red. Red is one of my favorite colors, and so there's red hidden, not hidden, but little pieces of red, all kinds of places in my quilt. But yeah, this is called Red Shape. And again, it was a class I took at QBL with Terry Gerard Diamond. And this piece, people love this work. Oh, yeah. So this is a quilt when I started playing with surface design. So this is painted fabric. And again, it was trying to learn about color, and it was a small composition. I was very happy with the way it came out, but the fabric is painted. So I started with white fabric, and I painted it with fabric paint and something they call an extender. But again, just a small sketch of some of the things I'm trying to do, was trying to learn about. So these two pieces are, again, me working in my studio and trying to design a piece of work that I thought spoke to me, using and trying to work with color. I'm always trying to think about how the colors work together. And I actually, on this one, I made the bottom, and I wanted to make something to go with it. So that was, yeah, and these have been exhibited several times in several different shows. And I did try to play. This is one thing you'll see on some of my quilts, is I do like to play with the texture on the quilting and change it up a little bit. So it's not always just straight lined, because here I have a grid and I have straight lines. And I think that plays with the depth perception of the work. There's two in this series, and these were, so I actually took my first class from Nancy Crow at Quilting by the Lake, and we had to make all these fabrics. And then we had to figure out how to put them in a composition. So I have two of them. So this is all commercial fabric that we sewed together in a wonky, kind of funny way. And then we ironed them straight and had to figure out how to, and so I made two of these. I quilted them very differently, and I think they add to the interest. So this one, I quilted along the line of the mark, of the figure here. The other one is just straight line quilting. So when you look at them up close, it plays with the depth perception and the dimension on the quilt. So I did it. So this is that one. Yeah. So this one, so it's very similar. And again, I was a little short here, so you see I added a little extra. But this is just straight line quilting, and there is, like, if you put them next to each other, there's a different play with the design. So my next two quilts are arches, and actually the second one is the first one I got ever accepted in the Q Quilts Art Quilts. So I was driving my daughter to an internship, and I was driving through Pennsylvania, and you know when you go through Harrisburg and they have all those bridges, and I was like, I kept seeing all these arches, and I needed to learn how to sew a good curve. So I came home and I have made several of these, but this is the second one. But I sat there and I made all these little arches, and I just picked two fabrics, sewed the curve. Some of them I had to throw away because I got the curve wrong, but I just kept sewing and sewing, and then put them on my design wall. And this one I did in colorway, so I tried to, there's kind of a red, a blue, a yellow, a green area. This one, the color I think came out very strong. The color work in this one came out very strong. But it's all based, and the first one, these are not as wonky, but I did try to work on making them a little bit more abstract, a little more interesting. And so this was the first one. Most of these are commercial. There are a couple hand-dyed in there, so you may see some modeled. I use a lot of commercial fabric, but I am learning to do more dyeing. So this is my first piece that got into Quilts Art Quilts years ago, and still one of my favorites. Still one of my absolute favorites. This next quilt I'm going to show you was exhibited in Form Not Function, which is it's now biannual. It used to be annual, but it's now biannual art show. And again, I was working in quadrants for a while, 4 quadrants, and I call this fieldscapes. And I did, 4 different quadrants of color, just kind of working on design. And So this next, again, is a work in quadrants, because I worked in quadrants for a while, trying to see the form that I was going to develop in. So I picked 4 color sets. I wanted to work with purple and green, blues and red, blue and orange, and the red and the yellow. Cut and piece each one of these little things, and then made this kind of bullseye, tried to make some kind of bullseye effect with it. I do think that quilting's important, what you put on the quilt, because it can take away, if you have a traditional quilt and put something contemporary on it, sometimes it can take away from the design. And so I work really hard to think about what is going to be on the quilt and what the quilt calls for. So then I started studying with David Hornig, who's a painter, and he's an excellent colorist. He has given classes here at the Schweinfurth. I think he did some at QBL as well. He does some online. I still study at the Nancy Crow Barn in Ohio, and he still gives classes here. So some of the classes I've taken from him are collage. And so I use paper collage as a way to develop ideas to transfer into quilt. So I have a couple quilts here that were originally paper collages that then I transferred into quilts. So this was a simple paper collage I did. I like to show this because I played with the quilting in the piece. So it's just really 4 shapes that I put on a paper, and I played with the color, but all the stitching is, I really played with the stitching on it to give it a little bit of depth perception. So I like to bring that to show the stitching and to introduce my work with paper collage and how it is influencing my work as a fiber artist. As I started working with paper collage, I took some fabrics and pieces of, and as you can see, a lot of these pieces I made. If any of you are sewers or quilters, you know you have bits and pieces everywhere. And so I started thinking about working in collage. I actually saw Picasso in a book Picasso had. He did a quilt at one time, and I saw it and I was like, oh, I think I want to try to do something in that vein. He used all kinds of suit fabrics and wools and things like that. His was more black and white and brown. So I started playing with those ideas, and from that collage idea came these next 2 pieces that I did. So a lot of it, these pieces I made, and then put them, around with other shapes, try to make interesting shapes. And again, like this quilting part is lined, this is gridded. And I really thought long and hard about how I wanted it to, how the quilting does affect the design that I have on the fabric. The collage work has really helped me develop my sense of design. So I feel like I'm learning to become a stronger designer as I work on the quilts that I make. And this again took bits and pieces of things I had at home, tried to put them in a sketch that I liked together. And again, you can see my little pops of red. I worked those through in lots of places. And again, I did think very long and hard about where the quilting is and how much that plays with your depth perception.
What do you use for your filling, batting?
So right now I'm using 100% cotton. Sometimes in some of my older quilts I was using cotton and wool. Right now I'm just using cotton.
And it comes in
different plies. And sometimes if I really want the stitching to stand out, I will put 2 layers of cotton.
Oh.
Just because I'm trying to think. My quilt that was here last year at QAQ is called Take Another Look, and that had 2 layers. And I did a lot of, and the quilting, it gets almost trapuntoed. I don't know if you know what that word is, but it stands out a little bit more, so it gives you a deeper texture. So sometimes I do want a thicker back. So this is the quilt that is in the book. So studying with Nancy Crow, this bullseye design, she calls it, this is her bullseye class. So she developed these quilts, and she always wanted to have an exhibition with all these bullseye quilts with all her students. And I was lucky enough, she liked my quilt enough, I made several of them, you'll see them. And this was the one that traveled for 2 years. And I was trying to think of how I was going to fill this bullseye shape she gave us in our class assignment. And I came up with windows. I saw a photograph of a Greek island, and it had all these beautiful colors and these little windows. And I was like, okay, I've got to figure out how to sew. So you will see I've made many of these quilts now. But this is and I call them frameworks because she gave us the framework and we had to design the part of the framework that was going to be ours. So I call this framework 1. This next piece is another framework 1 when they hold it up. This was in Quilt National in 2017. So this is that piece that was accepted there. And I was thrilled to have it in there. So this one I tried to work in a kind of a more neutral palette. I stuck with a very limited palette. There's still a few reds in there. But so this one was in Quilt National in 2017. And it's very big. Tina, I may have to hold it up.
Okay.
It's a big one. It's very big.
We have to show the back, though.
Oh, okay. Well, it's got lint on it.
That's okay.
Okay.
Oh,
I mean, it was rolled up in
You
cloth.
have to see the back.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So, and to me, because the front was a grid, I gridded. And I gridded them all because to me, there was already a grid format in it. And so I was like, okay, I have to grid them all. And it really speaks to the quilt. I can't tell you enough how important I feel that is when when you get your quilts quilted. It's important what you put them on. The other thing is, and I've ruined a couple quilts, the color of the thread. I did this one arch quilt that I've never entered anywhere, and I used a gray thread on it, and it really grayed it back. And I've never shown it. Sometimes I take it to show of things not to do. It's a beautiful piece, but the thread was gray, and it really grayed the piece, so it lost some of its luster. So it's my learning curve. So the thread is also very important, what thread you decide to put on.
What do you use? Cotton?
I use cotton, 100% cotton. Yeah, I try to stick with natural fibers as much as I can. So this piece, after making the brown one, I want to do something with more color variation. From the first one was very simple. It was just 2 colors in each quadrant. This one I really worked, and the color work on here, I did learn a lot about working with color and what colors work together. And so again, it's the same. This is Frameworks 4 now. The brown one was Frameworks 3. The first one I showed was Frameworks 2 because the one I did in class I don't show. That was Frameworks 2. Got my numbers right. But this is Frameworks 4. And then this one is another Frameworks one I was working off, and instead of doing the circles, I just decided to do like a square and a square. Artists in some of the classes I've taken, they talk about working in a series, like how you develop your eye as an artist. And so working in a series has been very helpful. So this is another one kind of in that realm. But again, it's basically a square and a square. It's not exactly square because they're very offset. But the color work on here, I call this one painterly actually because it has so many different variations of color in it that it gives you more of a sense like you painted a canvas. So this next 2 are quilts again that I've made paper collages with. And so they were all paper collages first, and then I went home and tried to figure out how to transform them from a small paper collage into a larger quilt. This first one is called Eclipse, and actually this was a combination of like 3 collages that actually I had cut parts of them out and they laid on the table and I was like, geez, I think I can make that into something. And, but this one is called Eclipse. And again, I worked very hard on the color, which I think the use of color in this is interesting, and I did do a lot of variation in how I quilted it. Because again, I think it's really like, this is quilted one way, this is quilted another way. I just think it adds to the design in the ground of the figure. And then this one again was another collage. It was actually a small collage. There was a segment of it that was a small collage, and I started to put it on the wall. And I made it much bigger than the paper collage. collage. And this one I call oleo because it's a lot of bits of little things that I put together. But it was fun doing the shape. All of these shapes, I was really trying to learn how to cut and sew. And because a lot of challenging is when you're doing, when you're painting, you can paint over something. But when you're sewing it, you got to engineer it. So sometimes the engineering becomes quite the challenge. I have a bunch on the wall here, and I continue to study art because I wasn't really art trained in school. And so I go every year to the Crow Barn in Ohio and spend a month. Sometimes I do 2 weeks in the spring, and sometimes I always do 4 weeks in the fall. So I just got home. I spent 4 weeks in school from October 4th to the 31st. And so a couple of things I do there is I'm learning surface design. So surface design is when you make your own fabric. So the quilt Seeing Red downstairs is some of my all those fabrics I marked, I screen printed, I dyed, I re-dyed, I remarked. Then I cut them up and try to figure out how to make a composition out of them. So that is the one that is downstairs is one of my early ones. So this is a couple of other pieces that I'm exploring when I go to school. So this first one on the side is fabric that I made. So those are all screen printed, both the top and the bottom, different screens that I made myself out of polyester fabric. I go over them, screen over them. I don't know if anybody knows the process of screen printing, but you scrape over it with a scraper, and if you have a resist, then the fabric stays white, and then you can put another color over it, and it changes the color, but it's all about color theory. And so these are different screens that I've made. The top one is pieced, is a bunch of different screen printed fabric that I made, I then pieced in strips. The red is just one fabric, but it was screen printed. And then the two different ones on the bottom are screen printed and then pieced together. And there's another piece strip right in the middle, so you can come up and look at them a little closer after if you want. But so that's some of my exploration I'm doing now is how to make my own fabric. So then this piece is a screen, and actually this is a traditional screen that I made the screen, and I loved the ground color, so I came up with this ground color. And I didn't want to change the ground color because I was really happy with how the ground color came out. So I decided I'm going to paint, because all of these were very light green or yellow, all these little, where the resist is. And so I call this one, it's like a mosaic. I call this one diversity because they're all a little different. And aren't we all a little different? So I call this one diversity. And, it was time consuming, but it came, the composition itself, so this is a whole cloth quilt. This is not pieced. I made the fabric. This is all made with thick and dye, not paint. And, but I hand painted with the dye into each one of those little circles, ovals. And I decided where each color was gonna go. And that was the composition I came up with. And I'm in the process, so this one down here, the blue one on the end, is a similar technique. It's the same screen, and it's just a different color wave. So it's the same exact screen, and I made it was actually a very ugly blue. And so I took it to the dye studio and made it a nicer color blue, and then I hand painted in. There's very subtle changes in there over the different colors. And that one is called Blue State. That one is called Blue State. And then the one next to it is similar to this one. Again, those are all pieces that I screened and then put together in a composition. The top piece is not pieced. That's all striped material that I made with my screen print and put it together. And they're all quilted. And these are quilted, each of the parts that look different, they're quilted differently. And so if you want to see afterwards, you can come up and see how the quilting is different afterwards. These two pieces are a little bit newer. I was trying to, so looking at making a whole cloth quilt and drawing figures and trying to think about figure ground and things I'm learning in art school. And so these two figures, I drew the figures on with dye on a white piece of fabric. And then I made a lot of marks with dye in this little needle nose thing and came up with the composition. And then again, I quilted them. All the textures on there are all the long arming I did to kind of play so you get a different sense from each section of the work. So this is my work that I continue to work. I have two pieces at the View in Old Forge right now. I have two pieces in an exhibit there, and I have a piece that's going to be in Craft Forms, which is outside Philadelphia. December 6th is that opening. So I just work in my studio every day. I get up, go for my run, and then off I go into the studio to work. And I don't have a plan of what I do. I go in and see what is going to inspire me today. And I always have something. If I'm stuck, I just start sewing squares or sewing stripes, and then it's kind of like my warm-up before I get into my creative mode. Well, I thank you all for coming. I hope I didn't talk too long or too fast, and I hope you enjoyed seeing my work.
Thank you.
For my help.